foreign policy has a consumer. We have to remember that. In fact, I would argue that there is nothing called independent foreign policy in this world. And that independent foreign policy perhaps existed in the world only in North Korea or Cambodia under Pol Pot. What was that foreign policy? We don't care. We will do what we want. That is independent foreign policy. You don't have to listen to anybody. You can kill million of your people and believe that you are right. So there is no independent foreign policy because we have to constantly cater to the needs of the times. I sometimes compare to Chandrika soap. Chandrika soap was very popular, say 50 years ago, 60 years ago. And so many soaps have come, but Chandrika soap has not changed its composition. But they changed the wrapper. Yep. So that is what you need to do. The heart remains, and you change the wrapper according to the convenience of or the needs of the times. So foreign policy keeps changing. We see that several changes have been introduced into the foreign policy, but that is to cater to the needs of the world, because it has a foreign policy as a consumer, because the other nations have to accept. They may not agree with you, but they have to accept that yours is a legitimate position. Nobody can say, I don't care what the world thinks and I think so. Not like that. So the idea of non-alignment was not that you are independent or indifferent to the thinking in the world. But the meaning was, maybe it was not at that time a very good English word, because when you hear the word non-alignment, you start thinking that there is some kind of a negative concept. Because non, you start with non, right? So maybe Pandit Nehru or others could not think of a better expression, which we have now found, which is strategic autonomy. Yes? You have heard about that. So I wish we had thought about strategic autonomy in 1947. And therefore people started thinking about non-alignment as some kind of a negative concept, that you reject this, you reject that. Not that. That's why I mentioned apartheid, I mentioned Palestine. And these are things which are fundamental to non-alignment. There would be no change in that. And therefore, we have to understand the evolution of Indian foreign policy in the context in which India operated, how it operated at that time, and how we are expected to operate in this modern, complex world. My own time in the United Nations from 1992 to 95, that was my second term at the UN. The Cold War had just ended, and Pakistan made a determined attack on India, thinking that the Soviet veto will not be available for us. Because on the earlier situations, the Soviet veto saved us on many occasions. But they said, now that the Soviet Union is gone, India may not have the protection of a veto. And therefore, they tried to introduce a resolution into every committee of the United Nations. And we were able to resist it. We were able to make sure that no new resolution was adopted, even without the Soviet veto. So that is the continuity in the relationship. There may have been people who attacked us or criticized us, but that period up to 1962, but what happened in 1962 we all know. It exposed the weakness of India as a state. Because we presumed that everybody will be well-behaved and reasonable and rational. And we are negotiating with the Chinese. And there was no expectation that there would be an India-China war, as you said. Hindi Chini bhai bhai was reached. And from 1962, our policy changed in a sense, because we started thinking about having strong friends, having reliable partners. And at that time, the only reliable partner we could have was the Soviet Union. Not because of any particular ideological attributes of the Soviet Union, but there could be mutuality between Soviet Union and India, because the stage of development of the Soviet Union was more or less the same as our state of development. At that time, nobody would have bought Indian goods in the West. The Western world only wanted our handicrafts and handloom, nothing more. But our consumer products were acceptable to the Soviet Union, because the level of sophistication of our consumer goods was acceptable to them. And therefore, by sheer economic compulsion, we were able to have a kind of barter system with the Soviet Union. And so in return for your Panama cigarettes and LeadIAS sweaters, you got steel plants, Bokaro, you got HAL, you even got the Indian Institute of Technology from the Soviet Union, because it came from others also. So the first period is now referred to as the idealistic period in Indian foreign policy. And that shifted to what is called a pragmatic policy under Mrs. Gandhi, because the way to the heart of the Americans is through Israel. We had diplomatic relations with Israel, but we did not have an embassy. The first thing he did was to establish a mission in Tel Aviv. And our Arab friends were shocked. They said that this is injustice. But that started a new relationship with not only with the United States, but with the entire world. And that became the third stage of our foreign policy, which can be called a kind of, what shall we say, and there are several words being used. We could say internationalized foreign policy or globalized foreign policy. Because those 50 years we had not moved away from our socialistic approach to economy. We protected our economic interests. But he opened the world, opened India to the world. And do you know, from in that period, that is from 92 to 93, 94, India's economic development or the economic growth was 11.5% against 3% before that, which was called the Hindu rate of growth. The people used to ridicule it by saying it was India. But between Dr. Manmohan Singh and the Narasimha Rao, they jumped into the water and began to swim. And that is what brought India to prominence economically around the world. I'm not suggesting there are no problems, no crises. There was a time when we had to export all our gold to London because we could not pay for 3 months of imports. These are all nightmares. But we survived all that, and we became equal partners of the Soviet Union and the United States. And the United States welcomed it. And today, our relationship with the United States is as strong, if not stronger, than the relationship with Russia or anybody else. No other Prime Minister had ever declared what India's interests are. Because every Prime Minister will say, my job is to protect India's interests. And that remained undefined. But Mr. Modi said, I have 4 priorities. 1, security. Second, development. Third, technology. And fourth, Indian diaspora. He said, these are the priorities of India. And which other country than United States can give you all the four? Because there was also neighborhood was also mentioned. So whether it is diaspora, neighborhood, technology, economic development, or security, the only country which can provide these to India on a reciprocal basis is the United States. And I don't know how many times he has been in the United States, maybe 7 or 8 times. There have been very many fluctuations in our relationship. So, and that period, which is currently running for the last 10 years, we call it assertive foreign policy of India. From ideological to pragmatic to universalized to assertive. This has been the evolution of Indian foreign policy. We can speak for hours together as to how all this happened. But we have to remember that on all these changes were brought in very deliberately, clearly, and with the interests of India in mind, with reciprocity ensured. So here we stand now, India's position today in the world, because it's not the most powerful country in the world. We have been trying to become a permanent member of the Security Council, which we have never become, which we have not become, and never likely to become. We'll go to that on another occasion. But at least the 6th place in the hierarchy of countries, that is leaving out the 5 permanent members, India matters the most in international relationships. Nothing happens at the United Nations without an active participation of India, whether it is just yoga or millets, which he promoted at the UN, to sophisticated weapons, buying the best equipment in the world, excellent relationship with Israel. So India has come to this stage of importance in the world because of these times. India's foreign policy evolved in a manner which was consistent with its original position, but also flexible as a result of the situation.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening, sir. Thank you for the insightful session, first of all. I thank the Student Forum also for giving us such a session. And we would like to have you more, sir.
Like to have?
So we would like to have your sessions more.
Oh, I'm here anytime.
Yeah, so my question was that few days back at the Kazan joint declaration at the BRICS summit, so they had emphasized the role of BRICS in improving the economic integration. So this can be seen as a very positive step, but how do we pave a way to secure our economic interest and at the same time make sure that the BRICS itself remain a representative body and there is no Chinese hegemony in that. So what would be the approach that we should ideally follow?
Okay, excellent question. But there are lots of elements in it. First of all, you should know the origin of BRICS. Do you know? Who invented the word brick? He's an American economist. His name is O'Neill or something. In 2001, he said that India, China, Russia, Brazil, only BRIC, no BRICS at that time, okay, are the fastest growing developing countries in the world, and they might become a challenge to the established world economic situation. Nobody cared for it, some economics professor saying that. But somehow Chinese got hold of this. And they said, this is a chance for us. And so why don't we make BRIC? as an organization. Okay. Then they said Africa is not represented. So South Africa was added and it became BRICS in 2006. So 2001 to 2006, we did not do anything much. Okay. But the Chinese just got hold of BRICS and made it in their own, in the sense that they saw this as an opportunity to fight the financial system of the West, Bretton Woods institutions, the World Bank, IMF. That is the wish they had. We also wish that, because, they have a grip over the world. So we would all like to be liberated, but he who pays the piper calls the tune, right? So the money comes from the Americans and the British. So no Indian or Chinese or anybody can head the World Bank or the IMF. You know that. And we don't like it at all. So the Chinese said, why don't we set up our own bank? And they have the money we don't have. So they set up a BRICS bank. And first they said it should be established in India, but they quietly established it in China and appointed an Indian as the first CEO. Okay. And then they started giving loans to BRICS countries and various things with an eye to fight the Western financial system. And we lost control over it because it was a bank and we could not involve ourselves in that. And it became a threat to the American system eventually. Okay. So they became more active in resisting BRICS. And it did not have an ideology, it doesn't have a charter. These 4 or 5 countries have nothing in common except that they are developing countries. So there is no ideological, glue to keep these BRICS together. So I wrote an article yesterday saying that BRICS look like a number of bricks lying there without mortar. There is nothing to connect these people, but they are all there. And so we are doing various things. But Chinese have brought it to the brink of a revolution just before this conference. They said, let us present in the BRICS meeting in Russia a program to create a BRICS currency. You heard that. So this put us all in a great embarrassment because we are all so indebted to the World Bank and the IMF. And to produce a currency would be a big challenge to the Americans. And to the extent that there was a rumor in Washington that we have to be tough with India to prevent such a thing happening, India joining this Chinese initiative. And that is why they raised the Pannoon case. And it was lying around somewhere. The man is not even killed. And they held the Indian National Security Advisor and accused in the case. Mr. Ajit Doval could not go to Washington with the Prime Minister because he was afraid that he might be arrested at the airport. So to that extent, the Americans put pressure on us to make sure that we don't support the BRICS currency. Can you imagine the seriousness of it? And at the same time, the Russians also started thinking like us, that they have so many interesting collaboration with the World Bank. And Russia today is a beneficiary of the war, right? So they are selling oil to the rest of the world. They are de-dollarization already, they are doing that. And so they didn't want that disturbance. So finally, between Russia and India, we sabotaged the Chinese plan. So these are the kind of things that are happening. But BRICS itself is not going to do anything more according to the Kazan Declaration. It simply says that as far as possible, the BRICS countries must do business with each other in their own local currency. That is fine with us. So the challenge that China wanted to mount against the Western system through BRICS has been prevented. Then the thing what Chinese did was they expanded BRICS. When they came up with the idea of expanding BRICS, we did not like it very much. We didn't know, first of all, who are all going to join, what is the complications, etc. So we said there's no need. BRICS is a very charming, small organization because we are not, trying to drive it against the United States. But they suggested such names that we could not resist. Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, UAE. So these are countries with which we have very good relationship. So there was nothing to provoke us into stopping it. So 5 countries were added almost automatically. And then came 40 applications. Then it became an issue as to what to do. So now that has been stopped. But all these 40 guys landed up in Kazan as applicants, but they were not taken in. So BRICS has become very, very, what shall we say, a doubtful kind of an entity. So I had written long ago that we should not just jumping into these organizations without thinking. Because when you go into an organization, you should have something in common to identify. That's what I call the glue, which is not there. Same in, SCO. SCO is an association of Central Asian republics with China and Russia. What are we to do with it? But why we jumped in? Because we wanted to have good relations with Central Asia. And we thought that it will be good for us to be there. And now it is dictated by the Russians and the Chinese together. Prime Minister did not go to SCO. Because it is in Islamabad, that is another reason. But BRICS and SCO, I think, are organizations which we did not need. But then the other argument is, it's always good to see people, talk to them, what their thinking is, etc., etc. So there are 2 kinds of views on it. But the most important regional organization which the world is now having, we are not a member. APEC, we are not a member. It's Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, and India is not a member. When I was in Washington, I used to scream at the Americans all the time, you don't give us even Security Council seat. But how about APEC? And they say, that is only a silver medal, we want to give you a gold medal. All kinds of idiotic arguments. It will never happen. But why not in APEC? I still haven't understood. Their argument at that time was India's economy is not as liberated as they are. But now there is no complaint about that. India's economy is very open. So this is one problem we have in jumping into organizations. So your question as to how much we can benefit from it is to be seen. Definitely there will be an advantage if the Western financial system can be eroded in some form. But that's not what we are looking for. At the moment in BRICS, we are talking about terrorism, COVID-19, blah, blah, blah. Nothing of any great substance. And there is no ideological declaration also. Russia-Ukraine war, we don't deal with Palestine. So what kind of organization is that? So it's a limited value.
Lead IAS, crafted by the toppers.